Good morning, everybody. Jó reggelt kívánok. How you say jó reggelt in Slovakian? Dobre rang? Dobre ráno. In Swedish, how you say it? You don't say it.
We don't say dobre ráno, good morning. We say gudag.
Gudag?
Hey. Hey.
That doesn't sound too friendly.
No, it is. And then you say do, like you. Always, even to the old lady, do.
Wow.
Because it's the same in Hebrew. You say like ani rotza. Like it's not really so.
Not so polite. Okay, good morning, everybody. So today we're going to continue our discussion. And yesterday we finished off by starting to explain the 10 attributes of the soul, the 10 Saphirot, as they are in the Holy Sphere. And the reason why we are really speaking about this is for two reasons. One is that this is a very basic theme in Hasidic philosophy, so it's good to get to know it. And also it has to do a lot with our discussion about faith and the commandment of faith and what the commandment of faith means. Because what we will see after understanding the attributes of the soul and where the intellect and where the emotions are and how they relate to each other and what's causing what and what is the effect of what, then we will be able to also place faith and its role in the whole system. So we will look at it also from the point of view, when we discussed what is really faith, we spoke about it a little bit yesterday or the day before. What is faith, not in the sense of what is the object of faith, but what is faith as a human attribute? What is it? Well, how does it work? What does it do? You remember we wrote down that it's like trust, like practice. So we will try to understand then what is the difference between faith and understanding. When you say I have faith in God or I understand God, what is the difference, the way it affects your day-to-day life, and not just what is the difference in the object of what you're talking about. So when we speak about the faith of God as a commandment, we can approach this issue from two sides. We can approach it from the side of what do you believe in, what do you have a faith in, what do you understand, what do you have an understanding of, meaning the object of your faith, your understanding, your belief. Or you can look at it from the perspective of how does it have a different effect on you if you have faith in something or you have an understanding of something. How is it going to affect your life in a different way? How your relationship with the transcendent God, is it going to be different if you have a faith in Him or you have an understanding in Him? And we will place also our emotions in this story. So we will say, somebody mentioned here, I think on the first day, the idea of love. And when I asked what is faith, so some of you guys said, well, it's the love of God. So we'll see if that is the case, and what is actually what does it mean to have love in God? What does love mean in general? What is it? So for this reason, we will now learn a little bit more about the soul and its 10 attributes. So yesterday we wrote down the 10 attributes, and I mentioned that this is something which is a very basic theme in Kabbalistic philosophy. It's mentioned in the Zohar. It's mentioned in Eitz Chaim, which is the major work of Chaim Vital, the student of Arizal, a collection of his teachings. It is also mentioned, by the way, in the Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is probably the most ancient Kabbalistic work. It's about numerical values and gematriot, and how these numerical values relate to each other, and the letters of the language, of the Hebrew language, and what they represent. And it is even in the Sefer Yetzirah, which according to tradition was written by none other than Avraham Avinu, Abraham, our forefather. It is definitely a very ancient language, which it is written in. And even here there is a reference to these 10 Saphirot. So let's try to first understand how these 10 Saphirot work in the human condition, the human psyche. So we wrote them down, and we explained that we can break it up to two major groups, intellect and emotions. And if you remember, we also said that a person's psyche or human condition is, first you can divide it to the garments of the soul and the soul itself. The garments of the soul are thought, speech, and action. And the soul itself is the 10 Saphirot, the 10 attributes, which can be broken up to intellect and emotions. And then we discussed, and this is where we ended up yesterday, what comes before what. Intellect is higher than emotions, or is it lower than emotions? And we asked this in two ways. We said, let us see if in the sequence of things, intellect comes before emotions, and let us see if in the ethical sense of the word, is intellect higher than emotions? Well, the difference in the approaches, when you speak about sequence, so it means almost like saying in the order of things, what comes before what? What is the precondition of what? And we came to the conclusion that we actually must have some type of intellectual capacity in order to have emotions. If you don't have any intellectual capacity, you cannot have emotions, because in order to have an emotional relationship which involves your ego, your personality, your relationship with the thing, you need to have a perception of what that thing is. If you don't know what it is, then you cannot have an emotion towards it. So we said in the sequence of things, definitely mind is over heart. Cognitive, intellectual capacity comes before emotions. But then we also said, as a side note, that even from the ethical point of view, intellectual attributes should be above your emotional attributes, which means that there's two ways to approach emotions. Emotions are very important in general. Before we get into the two ways we approach them, emotions are very important in general because, as some of you said here yesterday, emotion is the thing that actually puts you in motion. So it's the thing which is going to predict how you're going to act, how you're going to speak. Emotions are the thing that stimulates your actions. So emotions are extremely important. We can even say emotion is the body of the person. That's not the body in the literal sense, but that's like the main personality. You judge a person probably mainly by his emotional makeup. And there's two ways to approach emotions. You can have emotions like an animal, which means just your natural emotions, without a lot of thinking to be put into it, whether the thing that you're loving or hating or respecting is good, or is right or wrong, right? just out of instinct. You're going to love it, or you're going to hate it, or you're going to want it, or you're going to respect it or not respect it. And that's a very animalistic way of living, and that is not the proper way. The proper way should be that your emotions should be, number one, controlled by your intellect. Number two, changed by your intellect. Number three, created by your intellect. And let me explain what I mean by these three levels. So you can first of all, on the least, control your emotions by your intellect, which means I want to have this sandwich, but I control myself with my intellect. So my instinct is I want to have that sandwich, but my mind tells me, look, it's wrong to have that sandwich, either because I'll get fat or because this is the last sandwich at the table and it will be not proper that you take it because you already ate 4 sandwiches and some of the guys didn't eat even one. So it's just unethical to do it. I'm giving intentionally I'm giving a ironic example here, but you can place this example or this metaphor in any circumstance in your life. You have some instinct that makes you want something, and your mind tells you, no, this is maybe it's wrong. You shouldn't be doing it. But no, but I want it. Yeah, but you shouldn't be doing it. And you understand that it's the wrong thing to do. So most people, most of the time, have a very hard time controlling their emotions, but they're sometimes managed. And we all have the capacity to control our emotions. We just don't always live up to it. But that's the lowest level of things, to control my emotions. There's a higher level when I can change my emotions. So, for example, if I have an instinct to smoking, I want to smoke, and it gives me a good feeling. So I can control my will to smoke, and I won't smoke, but it doesn't mean I still want it. I will want it, but I just control my actions with my mind. There's a different level when I start hating smoking. I think so much and meditate so much about and learn so much about the terrible effects smoking has on my lungs and my health. When I look at a piece of cigarette, I start to hate it. I find it disgusting. Then I changed my emotions. And it's the same true in all levels of life. You can change your emotions and not only control them with the tool of your mind. And then, I can give another example of changing your emotions. You really hate somebody, and he actually deserves your hatred from your point of view. You can change that. You can control that emotion, so you won't act on that hatred. But you can even change that emotion. It's probably very hard to change it to love if you hate somebody, but you could change it, for example, to mercy. So I have, not mercy wouldn't be the right word, but like shoinalat, how you say to pity, right? So you will say, oh, it's this, poor guy. He's so. So it's you can change the emotion, and then there's a third level when you can create emotions, and that is really the work that should be done when it comes to godly and spiritual things. Because when it comes to human relationships, friendships, etc., the capability of getting in a emotional relationship with your surroundings is not a big deal, because you just get all types of how you say benyomások, like impressions from your surroundings, and those impressions will have an effect on you, and you will understand them in a certain way, and you will live your emotional. It's part of normal life that you have emotions towards your surroundings, towards things that you get impressions of. The thing with spirituality and godliness is that it doesn't come by itself, because it's very hard to get an impression of God. So when it comes to having an emotional life with your lunch, it's a pretty easy job because you just got to taste it and then you can say, do I like it or not? When it comes to having emotional life with another person, you can easily get to have some impressions of the other person and decide your emotional relationship with that person based on your impressions. When it comes to God, you really gotta work with your mind. Because if you don't work with your mind, if you don't meditate and you don't work with your mind, you don't try to understand what godliness is, it's going to be impossible for you to have real emotions towards God. So these type of things, when somebody wakes up and he says, I love God, that's usually not real. It's usually not real because in order to have an emotional relationship with something, you need to have an impression of it. And in order to have an impression of such a spiritual phenomena, you need to work very hard with your mind. And this is why we say that that the mind and intellectuality and intellectual capacity is higher. It should be higher, not only in the aspect of sequence, but also in the aspect of ethical priorities. It should be higher than your emotions. So, in general, the two ways in which the mind should be before emotions is in two Aramaic words. Two Aramaic words that always keep on coming back in Hasidic philosophy, which is iskafia and ithapcha. It, kaf, ya, or it, ha, ha. So itkafia means holding back or restrain. Is there such a word in English? Restraining. Restraint,
yeah.
Which means to hold back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Restraint. And isapcha is turning it over. So it means, do I just restrain my natural emotions, or can I turn them over and change them? By the way, this idea of how you should control your emotions, or to change your emotions, or the third level, even create new emotions, is the part of Hasidic philosophy or Hasidic text that we call avodah. So this is just really on a side note, I was not planning to speak about this, but since we generally have a discussion now about getting to know Hasidus, there's two types of Hasidic texts. One is Haskalah, and one is Avodah. So Haskalah is also an unreligious, secular movement, Jewish movement, right? But it means, I guess, intellectual meditation. And Avodah means toil. So when you learn a discourse, you can be saying, well, this is a Haskalah dikamayna. This is a Haskalah discourse. It speaks about high intellectual ideas, philosophical ideas. For example, what we're learning here is mainly Haskalah. It's Haskalah dikamayna. And then you have Avodah dikamayna. Minor means a discourse. I have an Avodah dikamayna means this is a discourse that speaks about how you should work with your soul, your psyche, your control yourself, how you should have love to God, how should you toil God, how should you serve God. Maybe serve would be a better word. Okay? So, getting back to our topic, we're speaking about how intellect can be over emotions and how it can be stronger. So we mentioned it could mean two things: either in the sequence of intellect and emotions, intellect becomes before emotions, or ethically, intellect should be over emotions, because we are not animals, we are people that should do the right thing, not just the good thing.
And to create the feeling, the third level was just for God?
Mainly, yeah. And so Iskafye Sapcha is really just about how to control your natural emotions. It's not about creating a new emotion. Yes?
I have a question well, obviously, I mean, I do understand this concept and it's fine, but what about the psychological aspects of the individual? Like, sometimes there are conditions of a human being which is not necessarily like a diagnosis, and there is, so what kind of standpoint let's say it's within a community, like there is like, not everybody can really control, so to speak, the emotion, like, I mean, you can understand something with your mind, but you are just incapable to change something. I mean, I don't want to particularly bring some kind of examples, but there is a neurosis, or I don't know, somebody.
So what is your question about it?
Like how the others, or how from the perspective, well, we can't say perspective of God, but how the community.
Okay, so I think
because you can't say this person is just not, I mean, has a
not ethical
IQ. Sorry.
Okay.
So because there are preconditions, and
yeah, sure. So that's
even geniuses, like let's say the Glenn Good pianist. I mean, if you look at him, how he plays, he looks like crazy, but he is not. He is genius. So
yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. So first of all, this discussion is not about judging people. Like, how should the community judge this person? How should this community relate to this person? That's a whole different question that we're not involved with. That's not the topic of the discussion. The discussion here is, if the question arises in an ethical context, that I have an emotion for something, should I just follow my emotion as a blind person and just do what my emotion says? Or should I think about if the thing is right or wrong? Then the answer is, you should think about if the thing is right or wrong. To me, very surprisingly, there is a way of approaching this issue of saying, well, you should always listen to your emotions. Listen to your heart. You know this song? This was a campaign song in Hungary 30 years ago. Listen to your heart. I don't know who sang the song, but I think it was a pretty famous rock song. Na, 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 na. Listen to your heart, which means you should listen to your heart. No, you should not listen to your heart. You should listen to your brain. So if you have, your heart tells you something, many people feel like, oh, I don't want to be a hypocrite, and I don't want to be acting against my inner drive. Well, you should be acting against your inner drive. You should be controlling your inner drive. That's what makes you human. And that is one of the major points of avoida, of serving God from the view of Chassidus. First of all, you should not be expecting to love God just like out of nowhere. You wake up one day, oh, I love God. No, and if I don't, like, many people tell me when I became religious, so many of my friends, and people till today say, oh, I really admire you that you were born to love God. Well, I was not born to love God. It doesn't work like that. You have to put, just like loving another person, you need to put a lot of effort into be continuously loving that other person. God is even more so, because you don't even have like a first impression of him. You need to have the work of your brains, your intellect, and especially when it comes to your natural drives and stimuluses, you need to control yourself. So that's our point. Now, each person is on his own level. I mean, I'm not here to judge geniuses or autistic people or people that have some disabilities. It's their thing with God. It's not my issue. The issue is, in general, for us to know, we should not be just following our emotions. That's what Chassidus tells us on a ethical level. Now let's get back to now we're speaking about the ethics of this all, but now let's get back to the sequence. So we said that there's the sequence of the Saphirot is this. So we drew it in a way of one line down. But indeed, if you ever saw a drawing of Saphirot, it goes more like this. So it goes, this is Chokhmah, this is Bina, this is Das, this is Chesed, this is Gevura, this is Tiferes, this is, I'm sorry, I made it wrong. This is Netzach, Hod, Yisod, Malchus. And then sometimes you put here Kesed. Okay? And sometimes, so you see how it goes? And then you could even see one that has like lines like this. Did you ever see this?
Yeah.
So it's a whole deal how we draw the Saphirot. But you obviously also saw that there is such a thing as putting it on like this. I'm sorry, I'm not a great. So, like putting it on him. Like that. Right? More or less. So this would be Chokhmah, and then here. This would be Keser, Chokhmah Bina Das, Chesed Gvura Tiferes, Netzach Hod, Yisod Malchus. Okay? And this has a significance because more or less, the body represents these 10 attributes as well. For example, we say that mind is over, that intellect is over emotions. So, in the physical body, the head is above the heart. So that's why Chokhmah and Bina is on the body, at the head. Das is somewhere like just between the head and the body part of the person. All the emotions are the main course, are the body. And then we'll get to all of it in detail a little bit later, why they're each drawn in the place where they are drawn. So, let's get back to it now a little bit, to this list. So, we'll go into it now in more detail, what each Saphira is, and why is each sphere where it is. So we said before that we divide these Sphirot to two groups, Chabad, which is intellect, and emotions. And you even remember we spoke about this when I said that there were two types of siddhas. The truth of the matter is, and we said there is Chabad siddhas and Chagas siddhas. Remember? Mm-hmm. The truth of the matter is so there is these two groups. Chabad is intellect. Chagas is emotions. But wait, it's not all the emotions because it's only till here. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, right? Chet, Gimel, Taf. But, so what about the rest? Netzach, Hod, Yisod, Malchus. So the truth of the matter is we could break it up to three groups. One is Chabad, two is Chagas, and three is Nahim. What Nahim is, I'll get to it in a second, just for you to understand the acronym. Nun is Netzach, He is Hod, Yud is Yisod, and Mem is Malchus, right? What is Nahim? It's also emotions, but it's like practical emotions, or I would call it applicative emotions. Is there such a word? Like from the word of applicant? Yeah, but not applicable. The emotions that apply things. So it's like the type of thing which we'll get to it later, and which takes your emotions and applies it to reality, applies it to action, right? So the way emotions move from emotions as a feeling to action. How do you call that? Applicative. I just made up a word. Applicative emotions. Okay. Now let's get to the first group. So the first group is Chabad, and that is intellect. What is this? The three levels of intellect. We said Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. So Chokhmah, Bina, and Das. What does it mean that you have three levels of intellect? In a simple sense, it means you have three aspects of intellect which come in a sequence of this, Chokhmah, Bina, Das. In order to understand something, you need to go through this sequence of Chokhmah, Bina, Das. If you will take apart any process of understanding something, from the second you realize you need to understand it to the end of the process until you understood it well, it needs to go through these three levels. That's the simple way to explain it. There's also another way to explain it, and that is that actually you could have people that are more Chokhmah type of people, people are more Bina type of people, and people that are more Das type of people. But we'll get to it in a second. Let's first understand the simple meaning. So what we're saying is, if now I will have an issue that I will need to think about a little bit and understand it. This is a process of understanding. It could take a long time, it could take years that I'm thinking of something and then how I come to understand it. It also could take a few seconds or even less than a second. But even if you will take that process, which is just a second, and you make it a slow motion, you will able to take it apart to three stages, three stations. What are those three stations? So first of all, how does every process of understanding something start? What would you say? What does it start with? What's the starting point? Sam, what do you think?
For understanding something?
Mm-hmm. What's the first stage of understanding something? Like even like, you know what, not stage one, stage 0.
Well, seeing that it exists, I guess.
But that doesn't mean you need to understand it. You see that it existed. So what do you think?
Acknowledge its existence.
All right.
Starting to process it, not only perceive it, but...
Not necessarily, because sometimes when I don't really understand what you're saying. I don't know what you're saying when you say, because you're saying the same thing, basically. No, you're saying seeing it, and you're saying knowing that it exists. It's the same. It's almost the same thing.
I think what he says, or at least in my understanding, he perceives it, and it's a mental process to acknowledge that it exists. So that's, in my mind, it's 2 steps.
Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Except children, the way how to know the words for this, to make understand what I want to understand.
Okay, so you're thinking in words.
I would say just opening up, being open to the idea first.
I would say the first thing is a question. Like, if you need to understand, you need to know that you need to understand it. Because something you're saying, you see it and you want to understand it, but sometimes you don't see it, but you know you should be seeing something, right? When you have a question, you don't know yet what you should be seeing. There is a lackage of seeing it. If you see it, you just want to understand more the details of it. But you always use the tool of understanding for the thing that you don't see, or the part of the thing that you don't see. You could be seeing something, but what you don't understand of it is the thing that you don't see, right? I see a plane, so I see the plane. I don't need to understand the plane. I need to understand the thing which I don't see. How does it fly? I don't understand how it flies. I want to understand how it flies. So if I'm a man from the Amazonas and I see a plane flying over me, I'm like, oh, this is a flying object. This is a UFO. I see it's flying. It doesn't make sense because things just don't fly like that. How does it fly? So the first thing you start off with is the question. I would call it darkness. So it's dark. And what is darkness? Darkness is not a total emptiness. Darkness is, if I go into a dark room, which is totally pitch dark, I sense things, but they're just not in order. I don't see the picture, right? So I would come into this room in the middle of the night, there's no lights at all. I would like tremble over things, and I would be very, very distressed because I don't know what's next. Like, I don't know, I'm have like little impressions of the thing, but it just doesn't come into a full picture. So a thing which you don't know anything of, you're not going to be thinking of, oh, let me understand it, because there's nothing to understand. So in that sense, both of you guys are right. You need first some impression in order to have a question. Just like if I walk to a dark room, I first need to sense there are things here. Let me put them in order. What is the full picture here? I need to make sense of this, right? That's how you say it in English. I need to make sense of these things. If there's nothing to make sense of, then you're not going to be thinking about it, right? So the first thing is darkness. That's how it starts always. And this is the way you sit when you're like, oh, like you're trying to search for the solution here. There's a lot of things here, and they just don't cope up into one full picture. It's not in order. It's a disorder. It's a chaos, and it's just little impressions, and you're trying to make a full picture of it to put things in order. What is the next step at understanding? The next step of understanding is, so this is, I would say, stage 0. This is the precondition of understanding. If you don't have this, there's nothing to work with. What is the next step? So you said to be open to the idea. That's obviously also a precondition. If you're not open to thinking, then you're not going to be thinking. But that's true about everything. It's not something unique to the process of understanding. That's true also for emotions or for anything else. But here the next step, according to Hasidic philosophy, is a lightening. You suddenly get like a lightening, and you're like, oh, this might be the solution, right? Like when Newton was sitting and thinking about gravitation, I think it was about gravitation, and he just, an apple fell on his head, and he's like, oh, this is the solution. Or when Einstein was sitting in his room in Switzerland somewhere and was thinking about relativity, which he still didn't know that was what he was thinking about. He was thinking about a problem, and then he saw the clock. You remember this story? And he saw the big clock on the train station, which was right across his home, and that's how he came up to the idea of how time is relative. I'm not going to get into because I don't fully understand it, but so there's like, whenever there's a major problem, there's always like a story to it. And I was thinking about this for a while, and then suddenly I saw this, and this is the solution. So you get like, it's a very concentrated lightening that makes you see the picture for a second. But this, you still can't say it's understanding. This is just the potential to understand. This is why we call Chokhmah, this is Chokhmah actually. So Chokhmah is called wisdom. It's still not understanding, because it's just the potential to understand. Actually, it's a potential to understand. So what does the word Chokhmah itself mean? You know, every Hebrew word you can take apart, you can find some friends to the word, some cousins, some brothers. So what is the word Chokhmah? So Chokhmah has two parts to it. It has Ma and Chak. So what is Ma? What does Ma mean? What? And what does Chak mean? Doesn't mean anything, but if you change the two letters and you read it Koach, it means strength or potential. So this is the level of Koach Ma. The potential of what? You're getting here the concentrate of the solution. You still, if somebody's going to ask you, like Newton was sitting there and the apple fell on his head, and they ask him, so please explain to us the idea of gravitation. He would not be able to explain it yet, because he's just scrubbing it now. It's still a little bit untangible. It's a little bit still untangible. So he still doesn't have a full picture. But it's like he's getting close. As we say in Yiddish, hat angehabt. He grabbed onto it. When you grab onto it, you still don't have it. You're just like holding it, and you really need to work. This is the time when you tell somebody, when you have this and you just got the solution, and somebody comes over to you and starts talking to you, you say, quiet, I need to concentrate now. Why? Because you don't want to lose it. You just grabbed onto it. You don't want to lose it from your hand of your mind. And like, hey, I have to place everything in its place. Wait, I have to make sure that this really makes sense. That's the next step. When you come to Bina. Bina is when you take this concentrated idea and you see if it could be applied to everything, and would it then make sense? Like if Einstein had the idea of relativity, then he would go and think about how it would make this. Would this idea, does it work in all instances? Like when in any time in science there is an idea, you need to prove that idea by trying it out in many applications, right? So the more applications it works with, it probably is more true. So this is the idea of Bina. Once you did that and you apply this idea in many circumstances, many instances, then you can say, I understand it. And this is the time when you can give a lesson about it. You can explain it. Because now you really have a whole building. It's not just a little concentrated little thing. That's why Bina, the word Bina means building. Boneh, right? What does the word boneh mean in Hebrew? Building. Because what you do in Bina, you build up Chokhmah. Chokhmah is just a little concentrated thing. It's the potential of things. You come to Bina, you then take this idea and you apply it in length, in width, in height, in depth. You try to build a whole building out of it, right? By the way, according to Kabbalah, there is, in every matter in creation, there is a masculine and a feminine aspect, right? So, and what the Kabbalah says, that in the godly realm, this is where it starts. Chokhmah is masculine and Bina is feminine. So if you look in biology, usually this is how it works also, that when the conceiving happens, so the man just leaves a little semen there, and it's a concentrated thing, potential to the future baby. What the woman does, she carries this baby for 9 months, and she builds it up. Also, by the way, in the traditional roles in a Jewish family, men have more of a role of giving a content, and women have more of a role of building it up in giving it over, building it in the household, making it a real building, not just a potential idea. Also, Chokhmah, just getting back to Chokhmah is compared in Chassidus to Barak HaMavrik, a lightning that lights up. What happens with a lightning? You're sitting in the room, you're sitting in this dark room, and as I said before, you have impressions of different things that are in the room, but you don't have a picture of it. And what happens? Suddenly there's a lightning for a second, and for a second everything lights up. Oh, and now you get a full picture. but because it was only for a second, now you have to recap in your mind. Oh, so how was it? So there was a picture on the wall there was a table, chairs, there was a computer here. So you need to then concentrate and remake that picture. By the way, the Tzemach Tzedek, who we're learning about, he really didn't want people to make a picture of him. And there is one picture of him, a painting. And how did that painting get created? That there was a non-Jewish guy, painter, artist, that really wanted to make a picture of the Tzemach Tzedek as a famous rabbi. So what did he do? He went on Shabbat to his Farbrengen, to the synagogue where the Tzemach Tzedek gave a talk, and he looked at the Tzemach Tzedek very closely, and he concentrated on him for a while. Then he went home and he painted him, but he didn't want to forget how the Tzemach Tzedek looks. So he was worried that if he walks out of the synagogue and he's gonna walk home and he's gonna see other people, other things, this will distract his mind. So he went home with closed eyes. So he looked at the Tzemach Tzedek, he closed his eyes, and he somehow trembled home. He opened his eyes and he imagined the Tzemach Tzedek, and that's how he painted him. And they say that the picture was pretty good. He got it pretty well. So the same idea here. You got a sudden lightening where you can see for a second. Where you can see for a second what's going on. That's Chokhmah. That is the core, the credo of everything you're going to understand of this idea in the future. But then you need to really have hard work in putting everything in place and applying this core idea to many aspects of intellectual realms. And once you did that, then we can say, now you understand. So you have an understanding of things. For example, you can see, you mentioned about words, right? You can see that the idea of, when you think, the way of thinking is, Hasidus really speaks hell of a lot about speech. We mentioned this in the first class. And about letters, and the significance of letters, and how do letters get created in your mind. How does it work? When do you start thinking in letters or in words? Because you can see that thinking you have type of thinkings when you think in imagination or in images, in ideas, and then there's sometimes you think in words, and you like almost sitting there and speaking. Sometimes people even speak while they think this way, because it's like they want to, like, when does that happen? When you're at Chokhmah, you never think in words, because it's still a very lofty, very untangible, very not yet applied idea. When you start having Bina, that's when you start thinking in words, because what is Bina? Taking this lofty, almost untangible idea and bringing it down to like a more steady, fixed place. Chassidus also says that this idea that just came into, it's almost like you are sitting in the darkness, and just like a lightning that comes from above and suddenly lights up everything, this is how it works with your mind. You sit in a place and you're sitting in darkness, and suddenly from out of nowhere, just a thing falls into your head. And you're like, oh, this is that. And where does this come from? Where did this idea come from? Like, you're sitting in darkness. How can you make light out of darkness? It had to come from somewhere else. So there's an idea in Chassidus which is called Koach HaMaskil, the attribute of intellect, which is like outside of you, and from there you get these ideas, these like streams of ideas.
Inspiration is masculine, perspiration is feminine.
Inspiration is masculine,
and perspiration is
perspiration, I don't know what that means.
sweating.
I like that. Okay, so if we went through these two levels, Chochmah and Bina, now we came to understand. So what is Das about? We said there's 3 levels, right? What is Das all about? So the truth of the matter is, Das is not really part of understanding as an intellectual capacity. Because once you had Chochmah and Bina, you can say, I fully understood the idea. Das is really a gateway or a bridge to the next level, which is emotions. Because why? Because let's say you understood something. Does that affect your emotional life? Not necessarily. Let's say I'm a professor that studies famine in Ethiopia. And I really get into it and the reasons for it and the causes and climate change and I really study the whole thing. Does that mean that I will have any emotional relationship with Ethiopia and the people living there? No, not necessarily. It could be that I'm studying this thing for 20 years and it doesn't have any effect on my life whatsoever, my emotional life. And I'm saying this idea because what we discussed last time, just 20 minutes ago, how sometimes we understand something is right or wrong, and it's very hard to change our emotions or control our emotions. It's not an automation. It doesn't happen automatically. We should do it, and we are able to do it. We are capable of controlling our emotions or changing even our emotions with the capacity of the mind, but it's not something which would happen automatically. You need to make an application. You need to have a bridge between intellect and emotions in order for the intellect to affect the emotions. And if you look back to the drawing, this is why. So where was the drawing? Oh, it was here. Where did we draw the? We had a drawing, right? Mm-hmm. Didn't we have a drawing? Here. If you look at the drawing, we said this is Chochmah, this is Bina, and here is Das on the neck. Why on the neck? Because this is what is called in Hebrew Meitzar Hagaron. Which is like the succulent. How you say succulent in English?
Bottleneck.
The bottleneck of the neck. Which means I have a lot of things in my head, I understand them. But it doesn't mean I'm going to live by it or I'm going to feel by it because there's a bottleneck in between my neck. It's very hard to push that idea through in order that it should change my emotions. So it's almost like if you don't have this bridge here, you could live like a totally detached life intellectually and emotionally or ethically. Just like there's a famous story that is quoted many times in Chassidus about Aristotle, who said that one time they caught him having a lot of fun with some prostitutes, and they asked him, "What's going on with you, man?" So he said, "Well, now I'm not Aristotle," which means one thing is having your intellectual life, that's Aristotle number one, and then there is my emotional life, that's Aristotle number two. That's two things don't have to do with each other. And we see many times people that are very intellectual, very smart, and they say very nice things, but when it comes to your emotional life, they live a totally different life. So why is that? Because it's not an automation. It doesn't happen automatically that just because you understand something is so and so, you're going to have your emotional life also so and so. It's a whole avoida. It's a whole course of serving God, of trying to take this intellectual conclusions and make them into emotional reality. And that is Das. Das is knowing. Not just understanding, knowing. What is the difference between understanding and knowing? So, knowing, this word, to know, is used many times in biblical texts as a synonym for sexual relationship. So, for example, the first time it's used, this word in the Bible, is when God created Eve. When God created Eve, and it says, "Ve'ha'adam yoda es Chava," and Adam got to know Chava. What does that mean? They had sex. So that's how they got to know each other. Why? Because knowing is a personal relationship. So in the intellectual and spiritual aspect of this is that when you understand something, it doesn't mean you have a personal relationship with it. When you understand something and you apply it to you, how does it make a difference for me? Then it becomes something that affects your emotions. When we speak about the service of God, so this is where Chassidus says, you contemplate and meditate about God and godliness. You meditate about the greatness of God. You meditate about the creating force of God. And these are all very lofty things. And then you come to the conclusion, well, God is the thing. It's the thing. And it's the only thing. But this still doesn't mean you're going to live by it. This still doesn't mean you're going to have emotions towards God. The thing you got to do in order to have emotions toward God, you have to come to a conclusion, not just that God is the thing. You have to say, God is the thing for me. And that's the difference, because once you do that, then it's not just detached intellectual idea, but it's an idea that makes a difference to you. And that is das. Das is the connection between intellectual ideas and intellectual understanding and emotions. Now, we're going to speak about das a lot, because this is one of the reasons why we're speaking about all this, is because the Tzemach Tzedek here speaks about how das is needed, knowledge is needed in order to have emotions towards God. But we're going to now continue towards emotions, just to get the full picture. But before we continue to emotions, just one word about what I mentioned shortly, and about it's that we said that Chachma, Bina, Das is the three levels of understanding of intellect in the sequence of things. Like this is the sequence how you get to understand something, but it could also be something that can describe people. So there are people. All people have Chachma, Bina, Das. Everybody has these three capacities. There are though some people who are more chachmadik people, more binadik people, and more das type of people. So you have people that are more creative, for example. They have these ideas. These are more chachma people. Then you have people that are not so creative in their mind, but they're able to apply lofty ideas to even in an intellectual sense. You know, sometimes you have somebody that came up with an idea but wasn't able to explain it in length and to describe it so well. And then you have people that intellectually, they don't have their own ideas very well, but they can explain extremely well. So just because you understand something well, it doesn't mean that you're able to explain it well, right? If you are a very detached professor, you could have really high thoughts, and everybody looks at you that you're nuts, because you're not able to explain them. On the other hand, you have people that don't really come up with a lot of new ideas, but they have a very good way of explaining. Why do you explain well? Because this is a capacity of taking an idea and being able to apply it to many terms. And this is somebody that his bina is stronger. And then you have people that are stronger in das. So you have people that are not so deep in understanding. They're also not so good at explaining, but they get the idea and they make it into a personal knowing. So it's not something which is outside of them, and that's so you could have people that one or the other Saphira, one or the other attribute is stronger by them. So this is the three Saphirot, the three levels in understanding, in the process of intellect. Now we'll get to the emotions. So we said that there are 7 emotions, but we broke them up to 2 groups. We said there is the first group, which is the Chagas group, and the second group, which is the Nahim group. So let's speak about Chagas. So Chagas is 3 words. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. Oh, a lot of stuff here. So, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes. What is this 3? So let's first speak about the first 2. We said Chesed is kindness, and Gvura is strictness, right, or strength. So if I ask you, how many, if you didn't know about these attributes, emotional attributes, what would you say, how many types of emotions do you have in general? Sam, how many types of emotions do you have?
I don't know how to answer that.
You look still tired for this question. Anyone?
How about 3?
Oh, because we wrote up 3?
Well, no.
Why?
I'm thinking negative, positive, and neutral.
What is a neutral emotion?
Where you don't hate something or love something.
So do you have an emotion then?
Yeah.
What is it?
It's neutrality. You feel neither.
So you don't feel. You feel neither means you don't have a feeling towards a thing.
No, there is an emotion that falls in that category. I'll think about it.
I don't know. You can have like strong feelings about something, but not know if you like it or not. Like, I don't know. I feel that this is important, but I don't know if it's good or bad.
Okay, so let's take this apart a bit more. You have a good point. You said positive and negative. First, let's take it apart a little bit. What does it mean, positive and negative? What does that mean? Positive in the ethical sense, it's the right thing or the good thing? What does it mean, positive and negative?
I didn't mean that. I meant that you like it and you don't like it.
You like it or you don't like it.
Yeah.
Okay. So the things that you don't like, there are things that are bad, right? At least for you, in your understanding. So Hasidus also says there is positive and negative, but it would be, and those are the 2 major emotions. And Hasidus does say, you're right, there is 3, but I will, not exactly the way you said it, a little bit differently. We'll get to it in a second how. But the first 2 are the positive and the negative. But positive and the negative would be better be said like the emotion of closeness and the emotion of distantness. Is there such a word? Distantness? So these emotions, like this, and this. Now, this is not necessarily hatred. So for example, let's give a few emotions. So obviously, love and is an emotion like this. It's closeness. But for example, besides hatred, let's say respect. That's also something which is of distantness, right? That's why somebody that you respect, you cannot really get close to. It's a different type of feeling. It's very hard to also respect and to love. this is why it's a bit hard to practice this in, let's say, a relationship between wife and husband. You have to have love and respect, otherwise it's not going to work. It's a bit hard, and people not always get the fine line between the two. But respect is also a type of emotion which is further away. Or strictness. You're strict to your kid. It doesn't mean you don't love him. If he does something wrong, you're going to punish him, not because you hate him, it's because you love him actually, but it's a feeling of distance, right? Your kid is going to feel distant from you when you punish him. And this has absolutely nothing to do with ethical grading. So you can love a good thing, a right thing, and you can love a bad thing. It's just, we're speaking about the motion of your emotion. Is it something you want to get close to, or is it something you keep distance from? And these two are chesed and gvura. Chesed is the emotion which causes you to get close to it, and gvura is the thing which keeps you in distance from the thing. And interestingly, yeah, forget about the interestingly. This should be enough for chesed and gvura. So this is chesed and gvura. And all emotions, you can throw at me any emotion right now and tell me, where does this belong? We will be able to take it to either chesed or to gvura. You want to try? You don't have to. I'm just, if you feel like you don't get the picture of it. Surprise. Is surprise an emotion?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I'm not sure. I don't think so. Surprise in no. The surprise causes you an emotion. So you can be surprised and shocked and get scared, and you can be surprised and feel euphoria, right? So surprise is more of an intellectual phenomenon. You're surprised, you're not expecting this. You didn't think this is something that could happen because it didn't make sense to you, or you didn't think that would happen. But surprise itself is not an emotion. It can bring to you emotion. But for example, the two emotions that we mentioned here, euphoria is a chesed type of emotion, and getting scared is gvura type of emotion. Anything else? You don't have to. I'm just, if you guys have anything in your mind, I want to make sure Sorrow. That's gvura. So anytime you think of this emotion and you go like this, or like this, you are gvura. You're feeling gvura. If you are like this, then you're doing chesed. It's interesting because gvura is always like a restraint, and chesed is like this. So, between the three forefathers, Abraham and Yitzchak, in the Kabbalistic texts, are compared to chesed and gvura. So Abraham is chesed. He's always giving. He always has an open house for guests, and he's always acting busy. He's traveling, he's going, he's coming back and forth. It's always busy by him. He's a chesed type of person. And then Yitzchak is a very magaba fordulo. How you say? How would you say magaba fordulo in English?
Self-reflect.
Yeah, a self-reflecting, like very introverted. That was the word I was looking for. You know Hungarian the best. So a very introverted person. You can hardly read anything of him. Doesn't really say in the Bible what he did, what he didn't do. Just he didn't travel anywhere. So he is more like gvura type of person. So this is the two sides of the coin. Now you can have emotion. For example, you can have emotions that are some type of mixture of the two. And that is tiferes. That is all emotions that are a mixture of two types, which are more complex. That's why we call it tiferes, because it's beauty. We said it a few days ago that beauty is complexity. When something is beautiful, it's usually not just one color; it's many colors, right? In a nice order. That's what's beautiful. So beauty, tiferes, is a type of emotion which is a mixture of different even contradicting emotions. So, for example, the simplest example of this is mercy. That's why we called it mercy. Why? Because what is mercy? You could either be kind or you could be strict. So let's say I have a student and I'm kind to the students. What does that mean that I'm kind to the student? I don't give a hoot about if he deserves it or he doesn't deserve it. I'm just kind. I'm a kind person. Like Abraham. People came to his house. He didn't know who they were, what they were, if they were good people, bad people. He was just giving to them. Chesed. That's kindness. When you walk down the street and somebody sticks out his hand and he asks you for charity, and you just give him charity. You don't know who he is. Maybe he's a bad person. Maybe he just what?
Want to buy cigarettes.
Yeah, or drugs, or maybe he's not even poor. He just saw that you are rich and you want, but you're kind. You're a kind person. You're not gonna judge people. You're not gonna look at him, and you just want to give. Then there's the gvura type of person who says, "Wait, who are you? Why don't you go have a job? And do you deserve this? Do you don't deserve this?" So to your student, you're like, "You didn't do well your test. I'm sorry, but you don't deserve a 5. You're bad." And then you have mercy. What is mercy? Mercy is, on one hand, it's gvura. On the other hand, it's chesed. Why? Because what do you say when you have mercy? I know you don't deserve it, and I still give you. Right? It's not like I don't care about what you deserve or you don't deserve. I do care and I do know. So it's gvura. But I overcome this and I still give you. So that's mercy. That's some type of mixture of the two. So actually, we could stop here and say, okay, these are the emotions. These are the emotions, and that's it. We basically, what?
Can you say another example for Tiferet?
No. I can't say because this is the typical example that's given, and there's a whole science of the different attributes mixing with each other, which is called in the Kabbalistic term hiskalalus hamidos zu bezu, the collective mixing of these midas. And we have the counting of the Saphirot, the 49 days, and it's 7 times 7. It's a 7 type of, and so there's a whole long list of what each one would mix with the other. But for Tiferes, this is the only example that I know of that Chassidus gives. And it's an interesting question. Why is mercy different than other mixtures of other Saphirot? I don't have a good answer for it. I don't know. I've been thinking about it also. But anyhow, so we could stop here and we could say this is your emotional makeup, but we still have another 4 to go. So what are these 4? So what it is explained in Chassidus is, let's try to imagine now a relationship with another person. So let's take through whatever we learned till now and place it in a relationship. So I get to know you and understand you. That's the first step, right? I'm not going to love you before I get some type of impression of you. So let's say I got to know you. That's the first 3 steps. The first 2 steps actually. Chokhmah and Bina is I got to know you. That is when I say, well, whatever I got to know, it would be nice to have some type of personal relationship with this person. And I start developing an emotion towards you. So let's say I understood that you're very smart. So this could cause me to want to get too close to you. And this could cause me a feeling of love. That would be chesed, that is born out of my understanding of you. Now, I can also be, because I love you, I can also be very strict with you, because I want you to go the right way. So that would be gvura, being born out of my understanding. But the relationship will still not happen, because we're still just on a level of feelings. This has nothing to do yet with, you don't even know about it necessarily. I understand you, and I love you, or I hate you, or whatever that relationship is, and you still don't even know about it. So it's not a relationship really, because you don't know about it. So what you need to do is, I need to communicate this relationship. And that is the last level of all the spheres, which is Malchus. Right? What did we say Malchus is? Anybody remembers? It means, literally it means kingdom, but what does it mean? Anybody? Speech. Right? If I don't speak, you're not going to know about my feelings. So, but it's not only speech, it's also action. But just because the first step of action is always speech, so that's why it's called speech, Malchus. So I have Malchus, but how do I get to speech? How do I keep up this? Like, what do I still need for this relationship? So the next step, 2 steps are Netzach and Hod, right? Those are the next 2 steps. So, let's say I have a feeling towards you. There are people that are very, very enthusiastic. Usually the way it works is there's 2 types of people in their emotional life. There are people that are very enthusiastic in their emotions, so they're like very warm. They could have like very strong emotions with high flames, both ways. So they can it's like they're like overwhelmed with their emotions, whether it's a positive or a negative emotion, but they're not consistent. So it's like they really suddenly could have a flame of emotions towards something, and it's usually, by the way, the creative people, right? And then you have people that are very consistent, in a relationship. They're never going to come home and won't be ever too romantic to their wives or their husbands. But they're going to always be there for them. So they're always going to be consistent and going to be disciplined, and so on and so forth. If you look at the person, so the drawing that we made with the person, let's try to find it. So it's actually, these things are under each other. Why? Because Chokhmah, Chesed, and Netzach are all these high flame stuff. So Chokhmah is the creativity. When you understand, and suddenly the thing comes into your mind. And, right? Chesed is the flame of giving. And Netzach is the, whatever emotions you have, the way you have them. Okay? Understand the difference? So this is what we call the applicative emotions, which those are, they are not emotions themselves. Netzach and Hod, they are not emotions themselves. They are the way you apply these emotions. So the first 2 steps is, are you a type of guy that's going to apply these emotions like this, like big waves, or are you like this? And we do it both ways, obviously. We all have both. But the same way we said, you have people that are intellectually more creative, or people that are intellectually more applying, like Chokhmah type of people and Bina type of people. You also have it in emotions, that you have people that are more enthusiastic when it comes to their emotions, and people that are more consistent and disciplined when it comes to their emotions. And it's the same string. So it's the same kav as we say. So you have right, middle, and left. So righty people are very emotional, very creative people, but they're less able to apply these and be consistent about it. And these type of people are more calm people. They have more of a full picture of things, and they're able to apply things. And they're also in their emotional life, they're more consistent and more disciplined. That's why it's netzach. Netzach is, we said it means victory, literally. Victory. What is victory? It's not the type of thing you have all the time. You have a fight and you had victory. The next day you need to wake up and start from new again, right? Hod, we said was, what was the English translation? Malazot?
Humility.
Humility. What is humility? I do my thing, I come every morning and I do my thing. So that's why Netzach and Hod. What is Yisod and Malchus? If you look at the drawing, it's in the middle. Whatever is in the middle, that's taking it to the next step, right? What did we say? There is Chochmah and Bina. In between there is Das. You understood it. Now let's take to the next step, to your emotions. There is Chesed and Gvura. Now you felt it. Let's take it to the next step. Tiferes helps you when you take two. When can you bring out an emotion and apply it to actual life? When you're able to have it with its full complexity, to see the whole picture, right? That's why Tiferes, which is a mixture of two, is going to be able to bring it to the way you apply the emotion. Then you have Netzach and Hod, the two ways of application of those emotions. But we're all speaking now in your heart, the way you feel about it, the way you are. It's nothing yet, it's not yet at the other person. And then, if you look at the body, these two, Hod, Yisod, and Malchus, are at this part of the body, which resembles the place where sexual intercourse happens, because that's the connection with the other, right? So when it comes to your psychological makeup, so you took all this now, understanding, feeling, the way of feeling. Now I need to take it to the other person. Yisod and Malchus. So it's really Yisod and Malchus is the way, let's say, the way I imagine I will give it over to you, that's Yisod. And Malchus is when I actually gave it over to you. Just 1 second. So Yisod is, if it comes to, let's say, about speech, the way I would imagine I would tell it to you, and then the way it comes out of my mouth. It's not both. So actually we can say Yisod and Malchus is communication. And communication is extremely important. You can have the whole makeup. If you don't know how to communicate yourself, you're going to be messed up. And it's also a thing that you, on one hand, we say, the end of the day, everything needs to be boiled down to communication, right? So it's part of the sequence. On the other hand, it's also, there are people that are more communicative, right? So you could have people that are not too smart, not too complex in their ways of their feeling, but they're very communicative. They know how to communicate themselves. And in itself, there is a way people imagine they will communicate, and the way it's preserved by other people. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I said it so nicely. And the other person said, wow, he was really mean to me. Couldn't he be nicer? But I think I said it nicely because the way I perceive it and the way you perceive it is not the same thing. So Yisod is by me, Malchus is the way it is by you. We had a question.
So in this trio of life, you have several triangles, which are the dialectical triangles. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
Right.
To the right the thesis, to the left the antithesis, and
Yeah. So there's several triangles and there's several lines in between, and the way one thing can skip the other, it's not necessarily You don't necessarily go through the whole sequence. You might skip from one level to another level and skip over a certain level. It's all possible. It doesn't need to have. But if you would look at a full sequence, this would be the full sequence of emotions and intellectual.
This tree of life incorporates the basic dialectical step. The triangle.
I don't know what you mean by dialectical steps.
Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's here in several
Okay.
countries.
Yeah. Basically, we explain this in the human condition. So we explain the way you come from your inner part towards the external, right? And it's really, we didn't get, and this is when once you get to Malchus, you start thinking, speaking, acting. We didn't even get to that. It's the garments of your soul, as we said. But we can say that this process that we went through is a process of coming from the inner towards the outer. So if you would, it's you, because we asked, is this you? It's not your garment, it's you. But it's you still the way you live in between other things. Your essence needs to be something which is a totally autonomous existence that exists on its own, disregarding whether it's living between things or not. I don't know if you understand what I mean. If you have this wouldn't make sense. If there was just me, I wouldn't need all this. It's not only I wouldn't need it, it wouldn't make sense. Because this is all about relationship, after all. Right? To understand something, to have a feeling towards something, to communicate with something. And what do we say? We still said it's you. It's not the way you communicate. It's not you understand? So the question is then, what is you? What is the essence? Now, essence is something that is determined, and it's independent on the way it is. It is, not the way it is. So the question is, what is you? What is the etzem? What is the essence? So the essence needs to be something which is not, is there you without you being surrounded by things? You understand the question? Can you define you without taking into this definition anything else? Could you first try to define yourself, just in mind. You don't need to tell me. But just in your mind, define yourself. Okay? Now you have a minute, everybody thinks, okay, I came up with a definition. Does this definition make sense if there would be nothing else besides you? Probably not, because the way you define yourself, you already define yourself with the way you relate to other things. I am smart, I'm not smart, I'm a very consistent person, I'm a very enthusiastic person. It all makes sense when you have a relationship with other things. So this is the problem. I cannot define my essence, because the essence should be something which is there even when I'm not in between other things. So that's why we say the etzem haneshama, the essence of my soul, is indescribable, and it's above these levels of attributes. So now, if this is the case, then we explain this now in a person, right? Let's get to the other side of the coin. The other side of the coin is godliness. So we say this is godliness. In godliness, there is 10 Saphirot. There is 10 attributes, and these 10 attributes are the spiritual makeup of God. Well, the same way we just explained it now in a person, the same way is true regarding God. It is not the essence of God, because these things in relationship with God also only make sense if God has a relationship with something outside of it, right? So therefore, Kabbalah and Hasidus says that these 10 Saphirot, the 10 attributes, are, although God, but they are the way God is the creator, and not the way God is in its essence. In its essence, God is describable just like your essence, and even more than your essence is describable. Not describable, indescribable, not describable. Okay? So, actually, Kabbalah says something very unique. He says, you see now that you have these 10 attributes, these 10 ideas, everything you see in the world, in creation, is ultimately a makeup of these ideas. Like, lahavdil, but it's I guess a bit similar to this Greek idea that everything starts off with ideas and everything. So, Kabbalah says there are 10 major ideas, 10 major attributes, and they are the building blocks of everything. So everything spiritual, physical, is made up of these building blocks. And that's why you can take apart a person and you say he has these 10 attributes. You can take apart godliness and you can say, as a creator, he has these 10 attributes. And everything he created it through these ideas, so everything will have traces of these ideas in it. Everything is built up from these 10 attributes. Just one last thing before we go out for a break. We said that actually there is 11, right? We started off with Keser. We said that above all is the crown, on top of the guy's head. And we said, well, it is, but it isn't. It's not really clear if it's part of the 10. Sometimes we count it with the Saphirot, sometimes we don't. And let's get back to our first discussion. Yes, ultimately, what Keser is will. And will is not really clear. Is that an attribute or not? What do I mean by saying that? You could say that will is the start of everything, right? If you don't have will, as we said it then, just last time we discussed this, if you don't have will, you don't have anything. But the question is will an attribute or is will your essence? And that's why it's not clear if you count it with or not. We said, what is essence? Is there is there a you without having a relationship with something else? We said, yes, there should be, and that's your essence. But that's not describable. That's why your essence is not part of the 10 attributes. The question is your will, ultimately, is it something essential? It's part of your essence? Or is it an attribute the way you relate to something else? Well, you could say, yeah, for sure it's a relationship because you want something. But is it really so? Is will the wanting of something? Or is will just some type of inner motion, inner drive that is there, that would be there even if there would be nothing else? And this is why it's not clear if will is counted in the Saphirot or will is not counted into the Saphirot. Okay, any questions before we go out for our break?
I didn't understand, I didn't catch up how will can be essence.
Yeah, so it's a little bit hard to explain, but the question is, what is will? So you could say, well, my will, I want a cup of coffee. Well, if you want a cup of coffee is your will, then that's for sure not your essence, right? Because it's a relationship between you and the coffee. But there might be a higher level of will, which is not a will for a specific thing. It's just the most inner motion, the most inner stimulus that is there in an existence. Anything that exists has this type of inner drive. Like so in a person, for example, will is the ultimate drive in your most inner and essential part of you. And that drive is not necessarily towards something. It's not that I have a drive for this and not that. It's just this inner motor that motivates your existence. And the question is, if you don't have this, I might even say you don't even exist, right? So therefore, I can almost say, this is your essence. This is some type of revelation of your essence. It's on the edge. So therefore, sometimes I count it with the Saphirot, with your revelation towards other things, and it's not your essence. Sometimes I don't count it, and then I basically say, this is your essence.
So instead of will, could I say internal energy?
Yeah, you can say that, but when we internal drive, I would say, because energy is already an outcome of this drive. But we speak on psychological terms, so we call it will. But you could describe it this way too. Anything else? Okay, so let's have a little break and we'll continue in 5-10 minutes.